And
so with you.
Thank you. Let us pray. Direct us, O Lord, in all of our doings with your most gracious favor. And further us with your continual help. And in all of our works begun, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name, and finally, by your mercy, attain everlasting life through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
No, today, friends, just every once in a while, I feel like the world needs a pulpit pup. And so I offer to you a photo of the canine to the ordinary when I was recording a sermon the other day. So she's just loving on everyone there. So who's in the chat? Adrienne, you can take that down now. Although to be fair, I love looking at my dog. Who do we have? Put it in the chat. Who's here? What congregation are you representing? Type fast, go for it.
Chat, there you go. You see the chat.
Can't see it.
Who's here? All
There it
right,
is.
there we go.
Spirit of Grace in West Bloomfield.
There we go. In the chat. Go for it. All right, Bigger Christ Church Detroit. We got Kim from St. Aidan's, Amber from St. Clement, Gretchen from Incarnation. All right, we got Deanna from St. Paul's, Jonathan from St. Andrews, Rachel from St. John's, Jamie Taylor. Yeah, I don't know why it's not visible to everybody.
I can't see it.
Yeah, that's because it's not visible to everyone. It's all coming into me as direct messages. Who
Okay.
knows? There's Dean, Betsy, a little bit like anybody of a certain age. This is a little romper roomy. Thank you. Andrea, all right. Susan from from Milford, Marion from St. Barnabas, Kitty from St. John's, Katie Walworth, all right. All Saints, Pontiac, Vestry.
I can't figure out how to make the chat work.
That's all
I'm
right.
sorry.
That's all right.
I'm from St. Andrews.
I am delighted to have you, Lorraine. All right, great.
I noticed at the bottom of my screen, there was an option that said chat. If you select that, that'll open up the chat window.
It didn't. Thank you. I tried that. I tried that already. I'll see if I can fool around with it a little bit and maybe get it going. Thank you.
Mine said more, and I hit that, and there were several things, but one of them was chat. So
you can change it to everyone at the bottom, and we'll see it.
Okay. All right, friends. What?
I'm Christy from St. Paul's, Jackson.
Hi, Christy. Good to see you. All right. How about I want you to do just a little bit of thinking. What do you long to do on the vestry? In the chat. What do you long to do on the vestry? Work together. All right. Laugh. Yeah. All right. Take decent notes. That's hilarious, Susie. All right. When to plan strategically, serve God's calling, make lasting plans. There you go. Right? Carry out the plans we crafted at our retreat. Yep. Bring some spirit, make a difference. All right. And then build coalitions. I love it. Spend more time discussing mission and discussing our problem tenant. Well, there you go. Help to grow the church, make an impact in the community. Yeah. This is, grow the church, yep. Yeah, absolutely, friends. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to read to you a little scripture. You're going to hear it again tomorrow. Here we go. This is from Matthew's Gospel. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and brought them to the top of a very high mountain. He was transformed in front of them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with Jesus. And Peter reacted to all of this by saying to Jesus, Lord, it's good that we're here. If you want, I'll make 3 shrines, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And while he was still speaking, look, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, this is my son, whom I dearly love, and I'm very pleased with him. Listen to him. And hearing this, the disciples fell on their faces, filled with awe, and Jesus came and touched them. He said, get up, don't be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw that there was no one there except Jesus. And as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, don't tell anyone about the vision until the Son of God is raised from the dead. And the disciples asked, why do, now I'm going to stop there. Because that keeps going. But as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, don't tell anyone about this until the Son of God, the Son of Man is raised from the dead. Here's my sense about mountaintop experiences. I think that they can give us insight, they can give us hope, because sometimes we get this clearer vision of who we are and whose we are and where we're headed, right? Because we can see so far if it's not cloudy. But I think sometimes too, mountaintop experiences can burden us with some nostalgia and our yearning for what was, right? And hamper our vision for what may be. That notion, right? And I'm pretty sure that Peter is a member of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, like in this passage, right? Because what does he want to do? He wants to like build some stuff. Let's get some shrines right here. We can build this, right? And I think sometimes what happens is we have this, we get nostalgic for, oh my God, I was on that mountaintop and then I knew, I understood, I saw the holy, I heard the holy, and we just want to stay there. Or we're continually looking backwards to that moment in that time. But Jesus is really clear, we're going to go back down the mountain. And the first thing they do when they go back down the mountain is they heal people. They heal someone. And it's this notion that if we stay on that mountaintop, that it limits our ability to make a difference. Because summits, by their very nature, are small places. And Christianity, at its core, is a faith that's ever expanding. And it calls for us to be reaching out and connecting with each other, to be in relationship with one another. And I think our future, we've got the image of the mountain. We know what we saw. But if we're continually looking in the rearview mirror, well, you can't drive forward. You can't go forward. And if they had stayed on the mountain, even if they built really good shrines without flat roofs that always leak, right? Even if they had done that, they would have missed the ability to do the ministry. And for me, that's what I think we're doing with vestries. I think that this is a time when the clergy in charge, the wardens and the vestry, are really called to create a vision for your context and live out your mission and ministry in that unique context. Because Jackson's, right? Jackson's not Waterford. Ann Arbor's not Trenton. Wyandott's not Livonia, right? Belleville's not Birmingham. Lansing's not DeWitt. It's all super unique contexts. And that, I think, is what makes it fun. And so when you gather on those vestry meetings for that hour and a half, 2 hours, and your pre-meetings before, you're creating your future course. So, Adrienne, let's go to a slide, the core purpose there. Yeah, next one. So the core purpose is with the clergy person. The vestry sets the vision and then executes the mission for your particular community of faith in your specific, unique context. Right? And what I want us to think about here is what I want to do in this is I want to talk first about the meeting itself, right? That vestry meeting, right? And then I want to talk about roles of the warden, roles of the vestry, roles of the clergy person in charge, right? But I want to do the meeting first. And this comes, Adrienne, if you can come back to me for a sec. I've been doing full-time parish ministry since 1988. I have served 5 different congregations, and I've served suburban, middle-sized, super integrated congregations, 50% African American, 50% white. I've served tiny working class congregation. I've served affluent suburban congregations, and the biggest chunk of my ministry was at an urban congregation in Chicago. But what I realized, for better or for ill, I've gone to more than 320 vestry meetings. So I have some thoughts, but what I want to say first of all is I want to thank all of you who are here, because you've come here on a Saturday and you very much care about what your community of faith is going to do. You care so much that you're spending a couple, 3 hours this morning doing that, and then countless hours after. And I know what that means, and I know how important it is. And I really want you to know how thankful I am, how grateful I am to all of you for living out your faith this way, for living out your ministry and your call from Jesus. So thank you. Let's talk about meetings, and I want to go to a couple of slides that I think about as these are, for me, the slides that that I think about. Like, I think we live and die by these slides. Okay, here's a vestry meeting. At the beginning of the vestry meeting, some of you do it on like Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Some of you are doing them on Saturday morning. Some of you are doing them after the 10 o'clock service on Sunday, right? But either way, you're starting, right? And as the time goes on, right? Presumably we're starting with, we've got the energy, right? On one axis, right? High, right? And then we've got time, right? And so when you begin, let's go to that next slide, Adrienne, right? Right? We begin, right? We start our meeting, right? With high energy, right? And tell me if you think this is true. And you can shout out about this one. As the time goes on, the engagement tends to go down, right? Is that something that you all may have experienced?
Yes. I don't know if it's that steep though. That's kind of
it is, you know what? Fair, very steep. So we're going to say a little bit of hyperbole, although God knows I've been in meetings like this. But there we go. And hopefully we don't have that curve working today. Then what else? So let's look at the next slide. What else is going on? All right, blood sugar, right? You've got you got, hopefully you've just eaten dinner, and then the time goes on, and your blood sugar drops, which the reason I point this out, friends, is because that actually causes physiological changes and can change how people act in a meeting, right? And oh, by the way, my parents paid for an undergraduate degree in biology. So I always like to work in a little bit, because my mom did long ago say, you want to be a priest? Why did we pay for the biology degree? And so this is one reason. Okay, next one. Here we go. Anxiety, right? Kind of low, here we are, right? And tends, as we get a little bit tireder, as our blood sugar drops, our anxiety or our tolerance for things, right? Our anxiety increases. So next slide, if we were going to think about, like, when is it, right? If we think about that visual, and we'll go back to that visual, when is it that you want to have your most important conversations? When in the meeting, all right? Shout out.
Right in the beginning.
In the beginning? Yeah, early on.
Early, yes.
Yeah.
After coffee.
What's that? Yeah.
After
right.
coffee.
Right. So, it's right. That's why I sent Rudy off to go get his coffee. I'm like, I'm not dealing with you. Go get your coffee, sir. Right. So, if we're going to do that, so now, and so what I want to think about here, right, is in your vestry agenda, when do you have, and Adrienne, go to next two slides over. There you go. What are the first two significant pieces that you want to address? And you can, Adrienne, come on back to full screen. We'll go to the slides. Yeah. So what are the first, and I'm not talking about approving the minutes or approving the agenda. I'm not talking about that stuff. But what I want to, what are the first two significant pieces that you wanna address? All right. We've got prayers, right? What else? What was the next one? Someone said
finances.
Finances. All right. So we perhaps we have prayer, finances. What other things might you have right up top there, friends?
New
Health
business.
of the community.
Oh, what was that? Winnie?
Health of the congregation.
Okay, health of the congregation. Congregation.
Controversial issues.
Boom. All right. Important decisions, controversial issues, mission and vision. Yeah, absolutely. How many of you typically have finances right at the beginning? Yeah.
No.
All right. So let me say a few words about finances, because it frequently shows up very early in the meeting, right? And the thing about having that is that my experience is I used to consider it a really good year if we could get to March before we were behind in our budget, right? It was like, I mean, if I could get to March and we were still ahead, I was the party girl. Typically by February, we're like, all right, we're behind, because when is it that we're typically getting most of our income? Like a big chunk of it. Some of it's spread out, but when are you getting a big chunk of your income?
At the end of
Say again?
January.
December, January.
Yeah, fourth quarter. Yep.
Right, you're getting it near the end, right?
Mhm.
So realistically, we spend we spend most of our year behind. And what I have seen until I started changing things, and I've observed in other congregations, I've observed that vestries, bishops' committees will spend a whole bunch of time on finances, largely feeling sad that they're behind, right? And the reality is that at the end of that conversation that you've had about finances, do you have any more money?
No.
No.
No, you don't have any more money, but you feel bad, right? And so what I like to do, and I see you want to send the treasurer home early. What I think is important, and what I like to invite congregations to do, and you guys are going to have your unique context, so you can say, well, that's what the bishop said, but I'm not going to do it. That's fine. You get to do whatever you want to do. And I'm going to tell you from 34 years of parish experience that what we would do is we would put finances at the end, and it was at, now you're going to be like, oh, there's high anxiety at the end. But the reality is we weren't expected that we were going to take a lot of time to react to it. We were going to know where it was, and the finance committee, or let's say the clergy person in charge, wardens, treasurer, a couple other people would have met the week before and would have gone over everything, have a really clear idea of what's going on with the finances, because I'm not telling you to ignore them or to give them short shrift. But what I'm inviting us to think about is where we can best interact with them. And then what we would be doing, the finance chair would offer the report. Everybody would have gotten it a week in advance, blah, 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 right? And then what we'd be talking about is, how are we going to increase our revenue stream? What are we going to do to facilitate people remembering, if they're right, to say, hey, here's my pledge payment. One thing is we would say January and February, this is the part where we'd be saying, have we handwritten thank you notes to every single person who has pledged? Thank you so very much, blah, 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 for your $3,842 pledge. Love, person on the finance, love, person on the vestry. Have we, dear blah, 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 thank you so much for your $260 pledge for this year. Love, blah, 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 person on the vestry. Like, we're sending these handwritten thank you notes to people. Thank you for helping in the ministry. Your money matters. Have we done that? That's the conversation in January and February. March, April, other times when we're talking about quarterly statements we're sending to people, how do we create statements that don't look like bills? Nobody wants it to look like DTE. It only reminds them of other bills they haven't paid, right? Instead, a quarterly thing that maybe has a beautiful picture of some recent church event, right? And says, here's where you are, here's what your pledge is, right? They can do the math. Don't put you owe, right? Right? It's like, here's what you've given. Thank you very much. Here's your pledge, right? Thank you. And again, you're signing it as a person on the vestry, right? Because people on the vestry know what people pledge. The clergy person knows what people pledge. Yes, they do. It's okay. The people on the vestry, I see you, Lorraine, but that's all right. People on the vestry, this is a small group. These are your leaders. Money is not secret, friends. Money is what we give to make a difference. And each of us gives what we can. It's not secret, right? It's not outside the vestry, but there it is, right? 30 years. And every single year, giving went up. 27 years in one parish, every single year, the vestry, the pledging went up every single year, right? Started at like 40,000. I hear this year their pledge income was like 560 every single year, because it's not, so for me, for folks to not know, particularly clergy friends, particularly clergy need to know what our folks are pledging, because it's a spiritual matter. And for me, and for, I think, healthy congregations, as the parish priest, I knew when someone was getting divorced. I knew when someone had cancer. I knew when someone had something really hard happening in their family. I held that. Why wouldn't I know what someone pledges? I've heard, well, then you might have favorites. Let's be very clear. I did have favorites. You know who they were? You, the people who showed up at Saturday meetings for 3 hours. Those are my favorites, because you deeply, desperately care. You care so much that you're giving your time, right? Right? And then when you find out, if someone's behind on their pledge, right, and it's significant, then I'm going to circle back with them and say, what's up? What's going on? How can I help? And no, I don't, you have something's happened, you can't pay it? Of course not. You've got something going on, right? But if I don't know and something's going on and someone doesn't want to talk about it, I've lost that ability to have that conversation. Blind clergy people, right? Like if you can't, without the information, not talking about blind, bad metaphor, but if I don't have the information, the data, I can't respond to it. So that is my sense. I understand that some people will disagree. And, I could say, well, finance, if it's vestry, I mean, the finance committee always knew what people were pledging, Many of the people on the vestry knew what people were pledging because they were writing notes. They weren't really paying that much attention, right? So, and I think you can be very clear. You all would hold that information, wouldn't you? You wouldn't share that information, would you? I don't think you would. So why do we presume like the other people on the vestry would? Particularly if you say, this is a thing we hold. So I think that's the piece. And all I can say is it worked really well in all of the congregations that I served. So we're going to have questions and thoughts, so you guys can ruminate on that, and we can talk more about it. But I knew that might be fun for us. So now, so if we move on, next, if we can go back to the slides. Oh, and Susan wants to see the core purpose again. Adrienne, can you throw that one up? And then we'll go back to my next one. Okay, core purpose. For our vestry and our wardens, the core purpose is with the clergy person to set the vision and then execute the mission for that community of faith in its specific, unique context. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that'll give you an idea. So let's go to, and you all have said this already, what's the business of the church? Nope, not that one. There you go. What's the business of the church, friends? You want to call it out? Anybody got it?
Getting out the word.
All right. What else?
Let the world know that Jesus loves them.
Yeah, I'm going to say a little bit more, a little bit more simplistically. I'm going to say the business of the church is prayer. What we do, we pray and worship God, right? And so if the business of the church is prayer, then I would say that, and you all have, a number of you have said that, I would say that's the first, go to the next slide, Adrienne, thanks. I'm going to say that's where you want to spend a significant amount of your vestry time, like in prayer together. And if we can come back to full screen, Adrienne. I think prayer grounds us. One of the things that we would do is we would have Bible study the beginning of our vestry meetings. So half hour, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour of the vestry serious time was devoted to prayer, right? We would read the scripture, would reflect on it, and then we'd go around and we would talk about where in our lives and in the world we longed for prayer. And then we would pray aloud for the person sitting next to us, right? Like sometimes you went right, sometimes you went left. So you had to really pay attention to those folks. But of course, people were writing it down. And we would, and these were not folks who were used to praying aloud, but we got really clear is that you didn't have to do it a particular way. You just had to hear what they were longing for and offer that to God. And what happened is that it became a small group. As you know, we talk about small group ministries. That vestry, each vestry was grounded in prayer. We just grounded in prayer. And I would have things like sometimes people's lives were really hard. And they're like, Bonnie, I can't sit through a whole vestry meeting. Is it okay if I just come for the prayer part? Because that will touch my soul. Like, yes, you can. Wow, yes. One time I had a former warden walking through the parish hall on his way to go pick up some stuff. And he realized, he walked through and he was like, oh, it's vestry. Oh, you guys are praying. Can I join you? And he sat down with us and did Bible study and prayer with us. And he was like, oh, I've missed this. And then after we were done, he laughed. Here's the other thing. It was beautiful. Here's the other thing that that would happen. Once we had a fellow who walked in and he was really distraught. We get to prayer. He walks in and he says, I think I have just made the biggest mistake of my entire life. And we're like, oh my goodness, what is it? And he said, I just bought a condo and I don't think I should have. Right. And he was almost losing it. An hour later, when we got to finances and we were $3,000 behind, he went off on everybody. Was it about our finances or was it about the mortgage he had just taken out? And we knew. It was like, okay. You know, we can hold them, we cannot, we can move on. Right? And so there's that ability, if we really say, this is what's grounding us, that's going to guide everything that we're doing, right? And then the next piece is, and Adrienne, go to a slide, is like, what's the audacious thing that you guys are working on right now? What is it right now, in the midst of your congregation, your community of faith? What's the thing you're working on, right? I think about this would be a perfect time, and this is my imagining. I know we've got some folks from St. John's Plymouth on, and I'm thinking at some point in the midst of their vestry meeting, the good folks from St. John's and Plymouth said, you know what? We need to be thinking about what we're doing with that house that used to be the rectory, that then was the youth group room. Like, and now we feel like the world really needs refugee housing. And my imagining is it's in this moment at the Vestry that group of people, because they're doing stunning stuff, guys, follow up with St. John's and Plymouth on what they're doing with refugee stuff. But my imagining is that they had a conversation in the Vestry at this point about, wow, could we do this? And any of those big audacious things that you want to talk about, of course, you've done some of that pre-conversation beforehand, so people aren't just hearing about it for the first time. So that's this moment where you're able to really think about what could be, right? And this is the point, Adrienne, if you could come back to all of us, this is the point where, if you remember that other slide, this is the point where we're at high energy, high engagement, high blood sugar, right? And we're really engaged, using everything we've got to have this vital conversation, having been fortified by prayer. And then after that, you do the thing like, who's going to show up for this? We need more ushers. No one's doing the prayers of the people. Why isn't anybody cleaning out the refrigerator in the kitchen, right? That's when we can do all of those things. And then just a bit about the creation of an agenda. I'm not a big fan of old business, new business, right? I mean, you know what the old business is. You're still working on it. New business, right? For me, at the end of a meeting, for someone to just bring up any old topic they want to at the end of a meeting, how many people have seen that one go awry, right? So for me, yeah, there you go. All right, so this is the point where you've got, I'm going to do questions in a minute, friends. But this is the point where for new business, no, I didn't have new business. We would talk it was very clear to everyone. And when we onboarded Vestry members, if you want to get something on the Vestry agenda, absolutely you can get something on the Vestry agenda. All you need to do is chat with the wardens or the clergy in charge. And we have the wardens meeting a week before the Vestry when we're planning the agenda. And that you talk to them before that and you get it on, right? So that we know about it, so we can prep people with things. I was a big fan of not having surprises, right? You want to be upfront. Here we are, we're good communicators, right? And if it's something that you think someone ought to be dealing with and they're not dealing with it, let's not put that at the end. Let's put that in let's chat with people. And then let's possibly see if it should be something really early on. I think, I was also big for the hay of it. You know, we had snacks because snacks were helpful. And then a last bit here on executive sessions. And this is I'll get to that later. In terms of executive sessions, friends, lots of times people do those at the end, right? So then because you're frequently saying, hey, what are we going to do with the priest's salary? You know, whatever the issue is, right? And the priest, all executive sessions, the priest knows about them. You've told the priest in advance, we're having an executive session, right? And you give them the basic topic. Right? And yeah, you want to talk about my salary, great, right? But don't do it at the end. Do it at the beginning, because you don't want high anxiety, right? You want low anxiety. Have the priest come later if you're going to do it, right? Don't put it at the end. And executive sessions aren't secret, right? That's the parking lot conversation, right? That's not the executive session. So thoughts or questions?
Anybody wish to add anything to the bishop? Answer the question.
What do you got? Zoom meetings? I think Zoom meetings are fine. We figured it out. I mean, I think sometimes I think, well, we're doing this, right? I think there's a place for them. So I think we can have Zoom meetings. I think you ought to periodically have some in-person ones if you can. Because I think there's that incarnation part, right? Right, that embodied part. It's also easier to eat someone's really good cookies in person. I found that to be really kind of lame over Zoom. Pat, are you raising your hand or you're stretching?
I do not know how to use chat, and it's not available to me.
Okay, well then, Pat, what can I help you with?
Well, this makes it difficult and the chat information goes so fast. I hope it's going to be placed on an email from something, because some of the information is great, but not all of it, especially when it goes, we talk about Zoom. Well, that's the chat. It zooms by. And since many of us, I'm almost 80, and it's not, I use the computer, my daughter is available, but it's not that great, the chat room.
It's not your preferred method.
Well, it's not my available method.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This will all be recorded and there will be a transcript of the chat.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, A. Phillips, you got a question?
Yes, I do. Good morning, everyone. Okay, my question relates to the question that you brought up as far as the business of the church. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say that in the past you have participated in 45 to 60 minutes of prayer before getting on with the rest of the meeting?
Yeah, we sure did. That was the norm.
Okay, so then how long did the meeting last? Especially when you put up that slide about engagement plummeting and all that. I'm just curious.
Right, they lasted about an hour and a half after that.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so you're not doing, there's so much that we could not put on, right? There are things that can be resolved elsewhere.
Okay.
That deep spiritual bonding, we can't do that elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay, gotcha.
That vision for what would be, and I have gotten tons of pushback for it. And I had some people who would not become Vestry members because they were never going to pray out loud for someone. I was like that. They said, we're Episcopalians. We don't do that. I was like,
right. It's about, I guess, your comfort level. And, you know, some people are willing to step outside of that comfort zone and some people are not.
Right. And to be fair, I just made her the chair of the Capitol campaign.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Barry, you got a question?
Yes, I just want to piggyback on what you said. We added the Bible class to our vestry meetings before we get started. The meetings go so much more smoother. Just for that Bible class first. It puts everybody in the right frame of mind. And we do it for 30 minutes before we do the vestry meeting. So I just want to say, if folks want to do it, I think it works better having that Bible study first.
Thank you, Barry. And Steve Dominic, you've got in the chat, you're talking about executive sessions, general topics, right? But the details regarding the matters are not public until the resolution is decided yet. Absolutely, that would be best practice. You know, there was the time that we were worried about communication and somebody put the minutes to the executive session in the newsletter before anybody else had seen it. I can only tell you that the reading of the newsletter went drastically up after that was published. Really? That's what we did. So, All right. Yeah, there we go. So St. James, 15 minutes of spiritual involvement hasn't changed the length of the meeting. I swear by it, folks. I swear by it. But you all will know what is right in your context. Let's go to roles real quick. All right, so roles of vestry and wardens and priests, right? So let's talk about roles. We're going to go to the canons for a minute, because what is not to love about the canons, in addition to, like Canon Miliotto and Canon Hardy and Canon Ekevag, right? We've also got the other canons. So if there's a canon 3.2.2, and it's the administration, it's an administration of the congregation. The member of the clergy in charge and the governing body of each congregation shall, and there it goes A through J, right? And it's things like you shall make sure that you have folks elected for diocesan convention. You should make sure that you're paying your apportionment. It goes for a whole bunch of things, but a piece that I saw here is H. The member of the clergy in charge and the governing body of each congregation shall exercise fiduciary responsibility for the property and the assets of the congregation, administer the affairs of the congregation in accordance with these canons, and cause all church accounts to be audited annually. And this is this sense, friends, that we're working together on this. Sometimes there's a false separation. Oh, we do with finance and the priest, you do spiritual. We're all working on these together. That's our polity. That's our canons, right? That's how we do this. And then let's go to next piece, right? Duties of the warden, right? This one, so 4.2.2.11, right? Gotta love it. A through D contains this phrase: the wardens, in concert with the governing body, shall, right, cooperate with, assist, and advise the member of the clergy in charge to develop and maintain a climate of mutual ministry, trust, and honesty. Cooperate with and assist and advise the member of the clergy in charge to hear the concerns of the congregation. Cooperate with and assist and advise the member of the clergy in charge. Here's my favorite, right? To act as spiritual lay leaders of the congregation. And my favorite one, to preserve order and decorum in and around the church on all occasions. I love that. Just wardens make sure that the decorum is preserved. Perhaps too, we might be thinking about using the proper forks, right? But and then the time. So what you see, what I read in these, friends, is this wonderful connectivity between the clergy and the wardens and the governing body, that is the vestry, that we're all working on this together, right? And advising. When I think about my wardens, I think about David Jolliffe, I think about Jack Garland, I think about Judge Mary Colleen Roberts. I think about Zanna Bradley, who was 23 when she became warden. Absolutely amazing people who were wardens and who were there to really give me some very helpful advice, to be sounding boards, to say, hey, Bonnie, that's not working, or Bonnie, pull back a little bit, stop talking. That's a shock, right? Stop talking. Have space for other people. You got a lot of energy. People don't always know what to do with it. And these are the people who gave me those insights that transformed our ministry together. I think, I mean, I really feel like it, that the wardens are working with the clergy person in charge. I don't think it ever works well when it's adversarial. That doesn't mean that a warden can't speak have a fierce conversation and speak truth, right? But I think we do that in a spirit of care and safety. For me, Ellen Ekevag on my staff is always talking about curiosity and grace. Right? When someone says something, she's like, I always try to get curious about what they're saying. Right? Instead of that notion of trying to respond too quickly. Let's see. And I think one of the things that I ran into is that I would have folks, if we can, Adrienne would come back to get rid of the slide, come back to me for a minute. I ran into some folks who had served on not-for-profit boards and who were really taken aback by the warden running the vestry meeting, or in the event of a tie, having a vote. Because they were accustomed to not-for-profit boards where the executive director, who they saw as a parallel spot, the executive director not leading meetings, not having a vote. And there are folks who are like, no, you're doing something you shouldn't do, Bonnie. I'm like, no, actually, here's our polity. Here's how this is laid out. And that, in fact, the clergy person in charge does lead the vestry meetings, unless specifically invited, unless that person who's there, right, who is currently filling that position has invited someone else to lead the meeting, right? And I would do that, right? But that's our polity, and that can be confusing for folks. And it is not necessarily Presbyterian polity or Methodist polity or Lutheran polity, but it is our polity. All right, let's see. Questions, thoughts, new canons you might want to implement.
I have a question.
Yeah, Beth.
So I've been toying with the idea of asking on occasion our co-wardens or one of them to lead the vestry member meeting instead of me. I'm the rector. It's not been the practice at our parish, and like you said, people might be taken aback, but what did you learn when you turned that over, or what did the vestry learn? Why would it be helpful? So, can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think every context is going to be different, Beth, right? And so what I want us to know, first and foremost, what our standard practice is that the clergy person is leading, right? That said, there are times, and I found that to be the case in my situation, where it was helpful and empowering for lay leaders to lead. But I was very clear when I would do a whole flow chart of responsibilities and where things overlapped. I was very clear that was a responsibility, I was offering to folks. What it did in our context is it pulled me back. I take up space. And it enabled other people to move forward and develop their leadership skills, which I think given my personality and my tenure, because I was there for 27 years, my tenure, in many ways, I think it was super helpful that wardens ran those meetings, because people then knew we don't need Bonnie. And I was there for like a big old chunk of time. And what I'm most delighted about is that congregation that I served for 27 years has just gone from strength to strength. And I think that had to do with because we raised up leaders and gave them those responsibilities. I don't think it's always the proper thing to do. And it's only, it really is only if the rector wants to do that and you have that conversation. Frankly, and sometimes, Beth, you may have wardens that you desperately want to lead the meetings, and then maybe you might have some wardens that you don't. And so I don't think you can say this is the practice. It's like, this is the practice this year, this term. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know, Lois. I worry about the verb. You say our senior warden leads the meetings, and it's helpful because they're entrenched with the parish and the parishioners. I worry about anybody who's entrenched. Knowledgeable, absolutely. But again, with our canons, that is something that gets offered to each warden each year, and we should be aware of that. And if bylaws of your congregation say otherwise, we have a canon that says bylaws contrary to the canons are null and void. So
yeah, I don't know that it's particularly a canon thing. It's just, when I was senior warden, that was just the way it was done. The warden always led the meetings. And yeah, entrenched was probably a bad choice of words, but I'm just I think the wardens have a better opportunity. I know clergy gets involved with communication with parishioners, but oftentimes it's on a whole different level than what the warden fellow parishioner is.
Yeah, and every context is different, and I'm going to wrap up here. Every context is different, but what I am going to say is that you want to facilitate as much conversation and as many different types of conversation as possible, which is one of the things I said for folks who were going to serve on vestry, in addition to pledging and regularly attending, is that each vestry person would engage in a minimum of one conversation with another parishioner that they did not know each month, so that we could facilitate that conversation and that increasing knowing people, right? So you always have that flow. All right, one more question, and then I'm gonna wrap us up because I've gone 4 minutes over. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anything. So friends, how about if we take a 5-minute break, and then we will return at 10:10. Thank you.
I'd like to bring everybody back now. Nope, that's not the right one. It is Mark Miliotto is up next around safeguarding finances. Canon Mark, where are you?
I am here. Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you, Ellen. So now that everybody's had 5 minutes to go increase their blood sugar, maybe a banana, a granola bar. So our blood sugar is high, our anxiety is low, and now we're going to talk about embezzlement in a way. We're going to talk about internal controls, financial safeguards, and there's a lot to talk about here. We're going to try to keep this to 20 to 25 minutes. So I have some slides I want to show. I want to get through the slides, and then we'll see if we have some time for questions at that point. And if we get to the end and all questions aren't answered, you can post things in the chat and we can reach back to you afterwards and make sure that your questions get answered. So bear with me for just a minute as I pull up the slides. Okay, so we're going to talk about financial safeguards. Just quick, what I want to do is first talk about what do we mean by financial safeguards and why do we do it? We're going to talk about the goal of setting safeguards, internal controls. I want to talk about some lessons learned from recent embezzlements within our own diocese, in our congregations. I want to talk about some of those that have come up recently and what we all can learn from those. And then I want to talk about, I've got a flow chart of a typical transaction as we follow from the very beginning of when that transaction starts all the way through to the point where the financials are presented to the vestry and then ultimately the audit at the end of the year. So that's my agenda. So let's start here. Financial safeguards. What are we talking about, right? It's the system of internal controls. What that means is we're talking about the policies and the procedures of the accounting system. Why do we do this? What is the purpose? Well, the primary purpose is to protect the assets of the congregation. The assets we're talking about here, this is cash, savings, investments, it's even equipment and the property. It's even the reputation of the congregation. All of these safeguards are put in place to protect these assets. Why do we do it? Well, one reason is to reduce the risk that an employee makes an accounting error. Even the most honest and capable people, me too, I've made errors on myself. We all do. So, but if you have good safeguards in place, it reduces the risk that those errors result in, big losses. We also, of course, a good set of controls reduces the risk of theft, misuse of funds, embezzlement, right? And that's we do of all of the purposes of why we have financial safeguards today. I really want to talk about this just because we've had a couple of significant embezzlements happen in our diocese, and I want to talk about the lessons learned from those. We also good internal controls provide greater assurance of reliable records. This is mainly for the vestry or the bishop's committee. It's about trust. It's about with good controls. That's just a greater assurance and trust. And then very related then is a good set of controls gives confidence to the donors that they can make a donation and know that their donation is going to be handled properly. You flip it around and say if the controls are not good, the trust level from the donor to the congregation is a problem. And what we found with some of our congregations that have been through embezzlement, that after the embezzlement, the trust level goes way down and giving goes down. So this is what we're talking about here is maintaining that trust, and a good set of internal controls can do that. Another piece you might not think about this is of why we do this is to protect the staff or volunteers from suspicion of mismanagement. You know, we don't want anybody being wrongly accused of mismanagement. And if the controls are good, they're enforced, there's really no reason to suspect that volunteers or staff are doing anything wrong. And then reducing the risk of a lawsuit. If I gave a large donation and I knew that the administration and the vestry were sort of shirking of their financial or their fiduciary responsibility, the failure to protect the assets, I could sue for failing to uphold their fiduciary responsibility. So good internal controls can avoid that. All right, I want to talk. So what is the goal? What's the perfect, right? And there is no one perfect in every congregation. It's going to vary based on your context. But what you're looking for is striking the perfect balance between mitigating the risk, right? We're talking about protecting, reducing, you know, building trust, striking the balance between that and practicality. You know, you could have a set of controls that are so overburdensome that it's just an energy drain and a time drain, and it's just impractical, even though, you know, you've reduced the risk to next to zero. But if all the energy is going into that, well, then what ministry could possibly be happening, right? So you've got to think about a balance here, and notice over here, again, it says we're reducing the risk. We're not eliminating it. We're trying to reduce it as low as we can to a manageable amount. One other thing I want to add, I meant to have it on the last slide, but you can throw it in anywhere. One of my, the auditor of the diocese, one of his favorite phrases, and I always like to share this because it's so pertinent, is that trust is not an internal control. Trust is not an internal control. Okay, I want to now get into some recent embezzlements that we've had throughout the diocese over the last couple of years and the lessons we have learned from them. First is PayPal. PayPal is an online credit card system. The way it works is people can make donations to the congregation's PayPal account, and the money builds up in this other bank account that is held by PayPal. Somebody has to go in periodically, usually at the end of the month, and transfer that cash from the PayPal account over to the church's checking account. Now think about if only one person has access to that PayPal account, only one person knows what money is going in there. How do we know that that money is going to be transferred? All of it's going to be transferred over to the checking account. We've had examples where one person had control of all of this, and that person was transferring money not to the checking account, but to their own PayPal account, or they were paying bills, online bills, buying equipment and toys and you name it. They could do it from here because they had those controls and nobody else saw what was happening. So it's imperative that if you have a PayPal account, that you have at least two people who have access to it, and that at the end of the month, the whole balance is transferred to the checking account. Don't leave anything over there. And again, the second person is going in. Maybe the second person goes in to print a statement and confirm the transactions and that they match what's coming over into the checking account. Another area that's come up recently, many of our banks have gone to paperless bank statements. Well, there's a good reason that we get bank statements, right? Somebody other than the bookkeeper should be looking at the bank statement. And if you're not getting a paper statement anymore, well, then that's okay. But that means somebody's got to have access to the online bank account, and they access the bank statement. The bookkeeper shouldn't be going in to print the bank statement. Somebody else should have access, and they can go print, download, look at the bank statement, look at the transactions. Does everything look reasonable? Are there any strange wire transfers? Are there any strange ACH debits coming through? That sort of thing. Do the deposits look reasonable? And then related to that would be clear checks. Even the bank statement, many of the bank statements, even if they are printed, oftentimes the checks, the clear checks, are not also included. They should be, or at least you should have access to them online. Somebody other than the bookkeeper should be looking at the cleared checks. Are they the vendors on the checks, the vendor name? Are they all reasonable? Does it look like any of the vendor names have been changed? Are there checks payable to employees or employee family members? Are the signatures proper? Was anything forged, right? So somebody has to be looking at that. These are, I raise these because this has come up and recently in a congregation. Where an employee was changing the name of the vendor after the check had been written and even signed, was then changing the name and then depositing those checks into that employee's own checking account. Nobody knew it because nobody was looking at the checks. Once somebody finally looked at the canceled checks, they saw what was going on, and that's when this all opened up. Okay. Reviewing and approving invoices. This seems harmless, but the same employee who was changing the name of the vendors on the checks was hiding invoices because bills weren't being paid because money was being directed to their checking account rather than bills being paid. So when invoices were coming in, past due balances were growing, the bookkeeper was receiving these invoices and hiding them. So nobody else knew what was going on. So this seems like a harmless little thing about just opening the mail and reviewing invoices, but it's really important that somebody other than the person writing the checks is seeing these invoices, reviewing them and approving them before they come in for payment. Fake invoices. This was a big embezzlement this year in one of our congregations. A vendor had their contact database compromised, and the thief was sending fake invoices to everybody on the contact list, right? So if you, let me put it this way, be skeptical if you get a notice that a vendor name is changing, an address is changing. For more significant ones, sometimes the vendors ask for wire payment. If the wire instructions are changing, be skeptical of that. We have a congregation that got burned by this significantly. So if you get an invoice you suspect is, as I'm describing, a fake invoice, don't call the number on the invoice. Go back to your trusted contact and say, hey, this looks odd. Did you guys really change your name? Anyway, very, very important. This one, I think we've all heard this before, but it bears repeating. There are thieves who will call your congregation and say, I'm from DTE. The caller ID even says DTE. They say, we're going to threaten to shut off your gas or your electric if you don't pay your bill immediately. And they'll say the best way to pay it immediately is to go get a Visa card, a Visa gift card, and then call me back with the numbers from the Visa card. This has happened in our congregations recently. I know it has. And so don't let that happen. They're really good at it, really tricky. As I said, the caller ID even has DTE or Consumers Energy or Detroit Water, and it continues happening. So be aware of that. One other thing to consider is look at your crime insurance policy limits. We've had recently congregations that had significant theft, and then they found out their insurance wasn't very strong. Look at those limits. I think we set a minimum in our diocese of 50,000. I think look at it and consider in your own context what might be an appropriate limit. And in this particular case at this congregation, the limit they had was paltry compared to the size of the theft. All right, I'm going to move on to a flow chart. I've got here a flow chart of the three typical types of transactions, of disbursements. And actually this morning as I was preparing, I thought of a fourth, and I'll just describe that one, even though I don't have it here on the slide. But okay, so first example, an invoice comes in. And as I was saying before, right, opening the mail is the first step in internal controls. Who's opening the mail? Is it the same person who's writing the checks? It shouldn't be. Somebody should be looking at those invoices. Somebody should be approving them. And maybe there's limits on how much somebody can approve. But the key is that you've got another set of eyes looking at this, and that this person is authorized to approve those payments, right? And then it comes into the bookkeeper. Another way that checks come in, requests come into a bookkeeper is a check request, right? Maybe this is a reimbursement. Maybe this is a payment to somebody who's not a vendor. They don't produce invoices. Maybe we're paying a musician to come in, right? So there's no invoice, but the music director requests this. So this comes in, it gets approved, it comes into the bookkeeper. So two ways it comes in for payment. At this point, then there's really two primary ways in which bills are paid. Maybe you come in this way. Maybe you've got QuickBooks, Realm. Those are our two most common accounting systems, right? The invoice is entered into the accounting system. A paper check is cut. And could be the other way around. Some cases, if you were handwriting checks, right, the check is handwritten, and then it gets entered into the accounting system. You know, the better way is to have the entering the invoice in and then printing the check, but it could be either way. Check is signed, and then it's stuffed, stamped, and mailed. This actually is a key point right here. We've had an example where everything here went fine and it got to this point. Check was signed, it was given over to the bookkeeper to mail, but the bookkeeper wasn't mailing it. The bookkeeper was taking the check, for example, something written to the church pension fund for the clergy's person's pension system. That check was being scanned. The name that said church pension fund was being changed to that employee's name. The employee was then depositing that into that employee's own checking account. So the accounting system said the church pension fund was paid, but the money was not going there. And then over here, that employee was hiding the past due invoices that were coming in from the church pension fund. So this looks like a harmless thing, but it's an important step. Okay, the other way is bill pay, and bill pay can be convenient, online bill pay, but you just have to look through the steps, right? So if you're the person who's entering this online is not authorized to be a check signer, well, let me step back. Let me do this. There really should be two people involved in an online bill pay. You don't want one person to be able to enter the payments online and approve those so that the bank actually pays them. Better that a bookkeeper is entering the information online, entering the vendor information, the amount, that sort of thing, and then somebody else comes in and approves that for payment so that the bank pays it. This is really the check signing, the equivalent of check signing at this point. So look at that. All of our online banks have capabilities of having different levels of responsibility. And you don't want one person to be able to do this transaction all by his or her own self. And then the next step is entering it into the accounting system. A third way is ACH, and this is becoming more common. Many of our utility payments are done this way, recurring ACH, right? There should be, initially it should be approved for payment, and then an invoice comes in, a receipt comes in, or an invoice, a paid invoice, that should be reviewed by somebody. And then the vendor in this case is actually submitting the payment. Now it's being pulled in by the vendor rather than sort of pushed from the congregation out. And then it gets entered into the accounting system. Again, you just want as many people, as many set of eyes watching all of this as possible. You don't want one person doing all of these steps. The fourth thing, which I don't have on this chart, is credit card payment. Just again, think about the steps involved in that. So an employee has a church credit card, they make a payment. So the first question is, are they authorized to make that payment? We should be thinking, are they authorized to make that payment? Was it pre-authorized? And then the second step is a report. Typically at the end of the month, all the transactions are put on a report. Receipts are attached with the business purpose description, and then it gets approved. It's important that it gets approved. Somebody else is reviewing the activity. Is it all business related, or is there, are there payments made that don't look like they have any business purpose? Right? Somebody should be reviewing and approving that. That then comes into the bookkeeper, who enters that into the accounting system, and the bookkeeper is also paying that credit card bill on a monthly basis. Again, you want as many set of eyes looking over all of those steps as you can reasonably have. Okay, and so then we continue. Now, so those payments come in, hit the bank account. The next step is this bank statement review. This is like, as I said a few minutes ago, if you don't have a paper statement, somebody should be going online to look at the bank statement, making sure that there's no strange wires or ACH debits, disbursement, any other disbursements. Are the deposits reasonable? All that sort of thing. And looking at the clear checks. Right? We've talked about this a minute ago. This is so important to look at these checks. Let's move. Okay, so then the bank account gets reconciled and approved. The person doing the reconciliation in most of our churches is probably the bookkeeper or the treasurer, because they're the ones most familiar with the activity, and that's okay. But if the bookkeeper is doing the reconciliation, then have somebody else approve it, the treasurer approve it. If the treasurer is doing the reconciliation, have somebody else review it, right? I mean, that's an easy way to get another set of eyes looking at bank activity. The financial statements are prepared. Maybe the bookkeeper does that, maybe the treasurer. That doesn't, everybody's context is a little bit different, but that is a step in internal controls, is just preparing the statements and then presenting them to the vestry, the bishop's committee. That's an important step in internal controls. It's a way to bring 10 sets, 12 sets of eyes looking at the numbers. So it is an important step. And then ultimately, all of this gets audited. So I'm looking at, I think I'm just about out of time, but I think I do have a couple of minutes for questions, and then I know we've got a number of other things that we would want to talk about before the end of our session today. So any quick questions?
Phil's got questions about ePay, Mark. Then you answered that a little bit, but he wants to know, with ePay, who's the approver payer after bookkeeper sets it up? Is it the treasurer, warden? Vestry, our
Oh, I
bank.
see that now with so ePay, you're talking about a vendor who is passing an ACH debit, right? So they're charging the church's checking account. Is that what we're talking about? Like a utility company. I think that's what we're talking about here, right? Or are we saying we're talking about bill pay? I'm sorry, I just feel I'm looking to get clarification on. Well, I mean, if we're talking about bill pay here, the procedures you have in place for the standard check writing process should apply online as well. Whoever is authorized to approve invoices that ultimately result in a paper check, it should be the same authorization when going through bill pay. And whoever is authorized to sign checks should be the one going into the bank to release those bill pay checks. And the title doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a treasurer or a warden or a clergy person. I mean, that doesn't matter so much. I mean, it's helpful to have that person be somebody who's knowledgeable of the activity, but there's nothing key about the title that drives that.
Good morning. This is Paul Wagner with St. Philip's. Within our diocese, who typically will be doing the audits at each church?
But I'm sorry that it was a little, you're kind of going in and out. I didn't hear the whole question. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering, typically within all our parishes in the diocese, who typically is doing these audits? Is it almost always people within each parish, not others outside of the parish, or what? I guess what's typical, what's normal?
Oh, who is doing the audits? I'll quickly answer that. I mean, it's a little, well, it varies. Our canons allow for an internal committee to do it. So ideally, it would be three people who are not involved, who are not signing checks, who are not doing bank reconciliations, who are maybe have some financial understanding, but are not involved in decision making or check signing. That's the most common way of doing it. Certainly, having an outside CPA come in is the best way, but I know those typically are costing $10,000 to $12,000, and that can be out of reach. However, if you think about setting aside $3,000 or $4,000 every year and then doing an audit, a full CPA audit every 3 or 4 years, that can be a way to make it more affordable.
Okay, I got it. That's really helpful. Do most parishes literally do an audit every single year, or is it more typical to do 2 years at a time, 3 years at a time?
So an audit, whether we call it an internal review or a CPA audit, whatever, it should be done every year. A CPA audit, most of our churches are not doing that every year. In fact, there's very few, maybe 5 or 6 are doing that every year. That some of our congregations are doing that every 3 or 4 years, and then in between they're doing an internal review.
Great. So what we're going to do is for all the questions in the chat is we're going to collect them and we will send out a newsletter addressing all of those in the coming week, along with contact information and the recordings of this session. So as we're going on, because we've action-packed Vestry Day, continue to put your questions in the chat, and we will address them maybe even more thoroughly in writing for the newsletter that's going to come out after Vestry Day. So this is how we're trying to be action-packed and plan to do it. So thank you, Mark, for any last words.
From me, no, but do know that if you posted a question, like Ellen just said, we'll get it answered. And if you have any questions that come up later, do reach out to me. in the diocesan office, and I'd be happy to try to answer.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much. So next is the Reverend Susie Shaefer and I. So Susie, if you could put up our slides, and if everyone, I know how our blood sugar, I don't know how your anxiety level is or anything else, but maybe just stretch, get the blood moving a little bit. Next, we're going to talk about making connections and hospitality and learning from data. So what we're about to present is data collected by an organization called Holy Cow Consulting. Some of you may be familiar because you've used them in transition or for mutual ministry reviews. We call it the church assessment tool, where it measures all kinds of things. But the data that they've collected is going to help us, I think how the church has been affected pre-pandemic and now wherever we are now, not quite post-pandemic, and sort of give us some key insights about what we need to be focusing on. So the data is over 2,000 churches across denominations and the trends that we're seeing. So let's continue.
All right. So those of you who've used this survey know that we just refer to it as the cat. So there's our cute little kitty cat picking over the table for us. So normally, if you've used this in your church, you're using it to look at your specific context. But like Ellen said, Holy Cow keeps a huge database, and they've done some extra work recently to look at data in trends from sort of the before times through, well, roughly last year, actually, because that's how data analysis works. It's not completely up to the minute. So we're going to shift from looking at the data to a more general conversation about hospitality. Some of the language will be familiar to you if you've used the cat, but we'll talk about exactly what we mean and then get into some where, what, whys. And we're going to spend a little time specifically talking about hospitality and families with children and youth. All right, data time. So the CAT data set is across denominations, and this is what they have found. If you read religion news, then you know that there is in our country a general trending down in worship attendance across denominations. And so they started looking at this with COVID. And so one of the things I want to say specifically is that if you feel like less people are in your pews now that we're back and post-COVID and all of those things that maybe we are, you're not alone. You are not the only people seeing this. The Episcopal Church is not the only people seeing this. Now, also, because this is how stats work, these are averages. So maybe you're seeing a stronger drop. Maybe you are seeing not as much of a drop in your weekly attendance. That's great because that's how averages work. But what I really want you to take from this slide is that you are not alone if you're wondering where people went. So beyond that piece that Holy Cow pulled out from their database, they looked at what they'd seen, what has changed significantly in the averages. And so the pre-COVID data is over 2,000 churches, and the during COVID data is over 500. So it's a smaller sample, but still it's enough churches now that they had some things they thought they could say. And it turns out they found two big changes, and that and only two. So the first one is based on a particular sentence in the survey, and it's simply this, that people are longing to connect. The isolation of COVID is still bearing out in what people want and long for in their congregations. People want to be able to create deeper relationships. Luckily, that's a business we're in. The second thing is this. Hospitality scores, the perceived performance of people's own congregation, dropped by an average of 8%. It's the only significant change in how people perceived how their congregations were doing. So we're going to talk about what we mean by hospitality for this data.
Right. So when they talk about hospitality, they're talking about two pieces of hospitality. One is how we feel those who are already belonging to the church. Are we feeling welcome, belonging? And how are we welcoming others? The external hospitality. First, let's focus on external. That's about welcoming newcomers, right? People who are not yet part of the community. And you can see here the statements. Our church welcomes and enriches many persons from many different walks of life. Members of our church have been prepared to personally welcome guests in worship services. So this is about how are we gathering? How are we creating on-ramps for people? How are we orienting people when we get there? How are we creating welcoming, belonging, and being especially attentive to new or people who are different or have particular needs? The other piece of hospitality is about this internal hospitality. So that's about focusing on connection within the community. So being part of this church community has given new meaning to my life. A friendly atmosphere prevails among the members of the church. I sense an atmosphere of genuine care and concern among our members in times of personal need. We don't often think about hospitality in this internal sense, but what the CAT shows is that essentially the higher scoring in hospitality are also those who are performing well in open and responsive decision-making, governance, and how they're handling conflict. That hospitality is a sign, how you're doing hospitality is the sign of a health of your congregation. It affects many other, it affects many other pieces of how your congregation is doing. How are we living together as the body of Christ? How are we welcoming others into this community? Those are the two sides of this hospitality coin.
So the CAT data also showed that congregations that are doing data or hospitality really well, if members who took the surveys enthusiastically agreed that the congregation is doing those 5 things Ellen mentioned, that they are countering the attendance trends and either had stable or grew by about 1%. And 1% doesn't seem like a lot, but when you remember that the average drop in attendance was 7% over this same time, that's a significant difference. So, hospitality. This comes from not the typical NRSV that we use, but I really like this particular translation of this letter from 1 Peter. Chapter 1, verse 9 and 10 says, "Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." Hospitality is not simply a church growth strategy. Hospitality is not only about getting good scores. Some of us really like getting good stars and good scores on tests and things. But at its core, hospitality is gospel value. And this is biblical mission. So, the other thing Holy Cow looked into is, why don't people attend church? And you probably all have some of your own ideas. I had mine. And here's some of what they said. The first thing is that people don't believe in Christian theology, or they found other ways to meet their spiritual needs. Lots of people don't come to church in our congregations because they're Roman Catholics, or they're Buddhists, or they're Muslims, or Jews. That's not really our target audience today. The next two are going to be more important for us. Why don't people attend church? Because they are afraid of being judged or not accepted. Many of you have probably heard the data that that Christianity in our country is often associated with being judgmental. And so that's one reason people don't want to walk into our buildings. People don't like to feel judged. Corollary to that is people don't like to feel dumb. And people are afraid if they walk in, they're going to get it wrong and everyone will notice. So, with those last 2 points in mind, there is a lot that we can do to address those feelings and help people have better experiences when they come to our contexts and our congregations.
So this slide, this is about, this is what I would invite. I would invite you to take these questions back to your vestry meeting and start thinking about them. Because it's how are we preparing for our gathering? How are we welcoming people into Christ's love? So what do people see when we leave our building? Like, do they see us like standing out in the parking lot talking? Does everyone just rush to their car? What do people see when we are working in our church grounds? What do people experience when they see us do ministry? What does our website say about who we are and then do it? Where do people first get greeted when they are coming to your church? How are we doing greeting? Susie, do you want to tell the story real quick about the ministry? Like someone was doing ministry and they were talking about their church.
Oh gosh, it was, so the presenter from Holy Cow was actually talking, she'd been doing a presentation and had one of her kids with her. And great trick when you have to bring your kid to work is then you take them out to eat afterwards. So they were sitting in the diner on a Sunday morning, you know, maybe like the one I know when I was in Lansing, a bunch of people, there was a certain diner people went to after church. And her kid, and they were sitting at the counter talking about the church they'd been at. And the people behind them were really loud. And it was a couple talking about their own church and saying how terrible it was that the kids in that congregation had been making so much noise this morning. And they were so tired of parents these days and kids these days. And they also mentioned the name of their church really loudly. You know what church our friend is never going to go check out with her kids? That one. Because their people, when they left church, were doing hospitality with grumbling and complaining about visitors not getting it right. Mm-hmm. That's just really not who we want to be. And it's so easy for us to be those people.
Right. And so like thinking about with the vestry, like what's the mood and tone? Like if we didn't know, like, can we put ourselves in the shoes of a newcomer? What is the mood and tone that we sense when we're in our place, when we walk in on Sunday morning? You know, are people friendly? That kind of thing. But also this is what we know from appreciative inquiry research. And this is David Cooperwriter. He says, we live in the world our questions create. He also says in the way that we talk about now he's talking about all organizations, but I really believe this applies to the church. The way we talk about our church matters. And appreciative inquiry research would say, so if you're constantly saying, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, what happens is the church just continues to decline. We have to figure out there is something that is working. I believe this. There is something that is working at every congregation, and to build on your strengths, to know who you are, to know what your values are, right? To get clear about your identity and mission and talk about that actually has a significant impact on the direction that your church goes in. And it's super important. And it also lets other people know, right? If we're friendly and talking about how great the service is walking out, that's going to build energy and satisfaction, right? How we feel in the space itself, how we're creating space of welcome matters.
So one of the first things we tend to think about with hospitality is signage in our building. So I have a cartoon for you because I love cartoons.
Go back.
Silly trackpad. So even if you can't read the tiny, tiny print on all those sides, the general picture is giving you the vibe.
Right.
A couple of them say, do not use this ring. Private, do not open. Do not even think about it. Do not put anything in this freezer. Do not take anything out of this freezer. Do not lean chopping boards. Do not.
And so what we're inviting here is, if the vestry wanted to take a tour around the building and just look at what signs do you have up? How are you communicating things? Right? Do you have a lot of these do not signs? Are we saying things with whimsy and fun and graciousness? Signage matters. It speaks very loudly to people who haven't been in your community or who haven't been there before.
This is an easy place. The way we do signs and language is an easy place to get at this fear of being judged too, that we know people are coming in with that concern. Do our signs imply that we think people are messy and careless and disruptive? Or do our signs give helpful information? When I was a camp counselor, we would work a lot with our counselors, training them to, instead of saying, don't run to kids, you say, please walk. Because what we're trying to do is give kids the information they need to behave appropriately. And telling them not to run might get them to stop. And sometimes you really actually just need to yell freeze before somebody hurts themselves. But generally speaking, we tried to phrase our expectations with positive language and inviting language rather than negative or potentially kind of shamey language. All right.
How do we take this? Yeah, how do we take this I'm stupid feel out of church? The afraid of getting it wrong part. Now, y'all, I am been an Episcopalian my whole life. And let's just admit, we have some unspoken norms, right? We do have pew aerobics. We have multiple books handling issues, right? And we use acronyms, a lot of acronyms that anyone outside of our church would not know what that means. So how do we intentionally orient and help people and create an atmosphere that it's like we don't really, no one's really getting it perfect or right? Like, so if you go to your church tomorrow and almost put yourself in like, I've never been to an Episcopal church before mindset, and think about, as you go through that, how would I know to stand or kneel? How would I know what book to go to? How is the bulletin welcome? Did anyone welcome me? Start really kind of viewing your place through those eyes. You might even ask a friend who's never been to your church to come and give you feedback. But I do want to say this, bulletins. I'm going to do a quick rant about bulletins. Bulletins, full bulletins are the most easy way to welcome new people. Now you're like, Ellen, we're a small church. We can't be doing a full bulletin every week. I get it. And I believe in seasonal bulletins with an insert for the readings. Something where you can really, the art is pretty, it's welcoming on the front page, it's thematic. It tells people where to go, how to stand, it welcomes them, right? I go to like all of our churches and, we are all receiving communion in a particular way right now, right? Don't just assume people know how to get communion at your place. How are we welcoming people to the table? To start really being more intentional about that. But the bulletin thing, I feel like is a real piece to consider about if you're really serious about welcoming new people into your church.
Alice, thanks for that. Congregational assessment tool. It's the survey tool that we were talking about as Kat. Oh, nice, Anne. So in thinking through all of this, you want to be able to answer 3 basic questions: where, what, and why. This is all about how we make it easy for people to come into our space and participate fully so that they can experience God's grace and sacrament and fellowship and love, rather than being so distracted by not knowing what to do, where to go, or why things happen. So I took this photo at a church in Ohio when I was there for a funeral last year. It was some of the best signage I'd ever seen. Everything had maps. It was also a really confusing building. I will say they needed good signs. But these signs were everywhere. And so I was surreptitiously taking photos. So that's why it looks a little funny. But the wear in this congregation was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And also, these are things you might want to even put on like the front side, like the front page of your website for visitors to immediately know. Like, what are the norms here? Is this a dressing up church? Is this a casual church? What do we do, and how are we orienting people? Okay.
People also want to know what they're supposed to be doing. We mentioned how every congregation is doing communion a little bit differently, especially in these COVID times, and giving those directions really helps. What are people supposed to do when you're passing the peas? People don't always have any idea. And then also just the liturgical actions we do. Now, in all of these, it does require practicing having that awkward conversation when there's somebody sitting near you and you're like, I think they're new. Maybe I just didn't see them because average worship, like regular church attendance, is now only once a month, really. So maybe we just miss each other. So I don't really want to say, are you new? And then find out they've been here for a year. You guys know that awkward conversation in your head where you're trying to decide, do I greet this person? Am I going to be the one feeling dumb because they've actually been here for a year? Just practice it. Especially ushers and greeters need to be specifically trained in this. But I actually did this at my home congregation recently. I'm not there all that often because, like Ellen, I'm out and about. But I said, we're not here all that often lately. I'm not sure that I've seen you before. I'm Susie. And it turned out they had been there like twice. So yay, I met new people. And they did not need my help, actually, which was great because it turned out I didn't actually know what was going on either. But practice that awkward introduction, and it'll make it less awkward. All right. And the why.
Yeah, why should I come back, right? Like, I may have visited once, but why should I come back? We felt like this Maya Angelou quote kind of says it all. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Right? How are we being community together? How are we being not just welcoming and hospitable? How are we compelling? How are we being relevant? How are we bringing a thriving spirit to our lives that's actually making an impact on how we live? Who are we authentically that we want other people to join us? Okay, next slide. I want to talk a little bit about children and families. So those of you who have taken the church assessment tool will know the top one or two is always, this is what it usually says, it's priorities, your top 1 to 2 priorities. Make necessary changes to attract families with children and youth to our church. It is always, 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 always number 1 and number 2. And I always ask this question, why? Why? Why do you want more children and family? Is this because you all have discerned a call to that and you want to get involved in the messy lives of families? You want to have that presence happening at your church? Is this about nostalgia? About what was, right? There's something that I really worry about a lot, because I deeply love the church. And that is the sense of this nostalgia, and not just like these were the good old days, but it almost like paralyzes us that this is the only way it can be. And I feel like when we get trapped in that, it's almost like the church gets stuck. And so what I've seen is, we'll be in the parish hall. I'll be doing sort of a congregational meeting after the service, and I'll hear someone say, "We just don't have any children here," when there's 3 children standing right behind that person in earshot. Or I hear, "Well, we just don't have enough families here," when I see just to the other side a mom wrangling her 2-year-old. Yes, you do. You do. And it may, with post-COVID church, it may never look like it did. But we actually have children and families now. And so how are we serving them? What is our why? What is our why? Susie, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, just the sense, going back to the Maya Angelou quote, complaining about people who aren't there when they're in front of you gets us back to the Maya Angelou quote about remembering how people make us feel. And we never want people to feel unseen or like their presence is not good enough. And that's really part of that's the core of hospitality, is for people to feel seen and valued.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay.
And there are changes that can be made. And we made the slide this way just to highlight the idea that welcoming children and families may involve actually making changes in what you do. And so these are some questions to think about, things to address in your congregation and how things do this, and it will change, of course, by context. I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Canute, who does a lot of children's things at my family's home church. So I have one kid who really does not want to go to church school, just doesn't. My own personal child. And at that congregation, church school happens sort of up to the piece, and he won't go. And we got a lovely note from his church school teacher saying, "Hey, he used to come to church school once in a while. That was great. We loved having him. Here's who's still coming this year if he's interested. Also, if he really would rather be in worship, that's great. And if he's interested, we're going to do an acolyte training if he'd rather be doing that." You know what my kid is super excited about? Acolyte training, because he gets to be up front and everyone's looking at him, which is like his very favorite thing. It was the most gracious hospitality note to actually accommodate my particular kid.
Yeah. So here's something, can be kind of looked at like, if you really feel like this is our mission, and you're clear about your why, start looking at your signs, literally and figuratively. What is it not just saying to children? What is it saying to anybody who comes in your building? What are the things you're providing for, a child that's going to walk through your doors? Are the ushers ready to show families where to go if they need to leave at any point? What do you do when children make noise in the service? So there are a lot of, we need to decide sort of as a community how we want to deal with that. Or if children are elsewhere during worship, how are you accommodating parents and children? So just some thoughts for making necessary changes to attract children and families. Mm-hmm. So I know we went through all that real quickly. And again, you're going to get all of our slides, but I invite you to put in your chat anything that you want more information on or that you're curious about or questions. Or you can be like, Ellen and Susie, you answered all of our questions. Any takeaways? So here's what I want to say. Think about hospitality. Think about messaging. Think about your why. Think about what makes us compelling. As we move forward.
And we'll share these slides, and we'll also collect some of the other things people put earlier in the chat and add those as insights to share later this week. Thank you all for your attention.
Okay. I know we're a little over. I know this is action packed. Let's give everybody like 3 minutes, stand up, refill your coffee, go to the bathroom. Let's meet back here at 11:13. 11:13. I know this is a quick break. You have about, I don't know, I'll give you 15 more seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and regather. Next presenting is Canon Joanne Hardy.
Yep. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks everyone for coming, and thank you for staying. I realize that Adrienne and I are the only things between you and your box lunch. So I'll just like hustle through the slides and invite you to call or text me with questions, and the slides and all the links will be sent out next week when we send out the presentation. So today I'm going to just talk right quick about just based on my experience, the questions that congregations ask me most frequently. So it's sort of like, when should you call the diocesan office? Now, I want to go on record as saying that you can call or email me anytime, or any of us, but there are certain situations where you really do need to call quickly. And just a note, that is actually my real telephone. It does look like that. I've been here for a super long time, and I've kept my same phone. So there we go. And thanks to Adrienne for moving my slides along and putting my presentation together. The first thing I want to tell you about is really good news, and that's about grants for your ministry. I get a lot of questions about this, and working with Diocesan Council and Mark with trustees, we want to let you know about these. There are 3 grants that are open right now. They are the Social Service Ministries grant of Diocesan Council. These are small grants, and when we do these, we spread the whole diocese wide. Anything having to do with food, clothing for your community, feeding ministries, healthcare, education for children. These grants are super simple to get. The form is not hard. The grant application is out now. It's on our website and also in the weekly connection. The total pool of money for the Social Service Ministries grant is $53,500, I think, Mark. And so from that, we're able to spread and help each local community that applies do something that's helpful right there where you are. The Advocacy Public Witness, we call them the Covenant 5 grants, are really to help you do change, social change, peace and justice initiatives, voting rights, LGBTQ advocacy, those sorts of things. That if you're doing educational sessions or planning to protest or do something with End Gun Violence Michigan, we can help you. Again, the grant app is not hard. You can just hop right on. You can do it very simply. And the committees will take a look and then they'll allocate money. The trustees also have the summer program, the Summer Children's Program grant from the Trethewey Downs Batchelder Fund. Again, easy grants to get to help you with your VBS or whatever kind of events you're doing for your young people and your children this summer. The Trethewey grants for children are due March 1. The other 2 grants I talked about are due March 15th. It will take you literally no time to do these. So please know that these funds are available and we want to help the local congregations. The next set of grants I want to talk about is a little bit more involved. And really, we have put roads, parking lots, done HVAC renovations all across the diocese. Both Diocesan Council and the trustees have grants for building repairs. If something's going on at your church and you have a lot of deferred maintenance, we don't want it to get to that point. We want to help you before you get there. So with most of these grants, the trustees and council like to see the congregation having done some fundraising towards the project. We need to have a current audit. We need to look at your apportionment status. But again, the grants are not that hard to get. We like to have 3 bids on these bigger projects. So let us know how we can help you. Also, Diocesan Council, if you need a bigger loan, a bridge loan for a big project, let us know. We can help you. Funds are available. So don't sit there and think, what are we going to do when you have your junior warden worrying about repairs? Please call or email me, call or email Mark, and we can help you through the process to try and get a grant or a loan for your congregation. Another big thing I get lots of questions on, and I heard one of them today and my ears, of course, perked up, is about property. Anytime a congregation wants to buy, sell, lease, or close a church property, you need bishop and standing committee approval. So I heard somebody talk about they spend a lot of time in their vestry meeting talking about their tenant. Tenant disputes and questions is also something that I have experience in, and we have people that can consult with you to help you through that. I know that for smaller groups like your AA, your scouting and community groups that use your space, that you're not expected to have a lease. You need to have an agreement just so you know where they're going to be in there. But for bigger groups, if a church is renting your sanctuary for worship, if you have people renting office space in your building, you really need to have a legal lease agreement. There was a congregation a few years back that had another church worshiping in their space, maybe that started at 1 p.m. after their worship service. They did not have a legal lease agreement, and the people didn't pay their rent. They encroached upon every part of the building that they weren't entitled to, but the congregation had a hard time getting rid of them or evicting them because there was no legal lease agreement. So we can help you with that. The standing committee can help. So if you have tenants, you don't think they're quite managed in a way that's to your benefit, and I can tell you what, judges don't like to get involved in church business. So when we show up in court about a tenant in a church, no one is looked upon favorably. So let's please, we can straighten it out now. We can go back and fix things. So if you're worried about tenants and who's on your property and how to manage that, please let me know. I want to say right there too about just a quickie about acceptance of property as gifts from parishioners. Sometimes it's so lovely and it really works out well for you. In my experience, it's not always the best idea. So there is a church that actually is closed now that had 2 pieces of donated property that the diocese inherited, so to speak. One of them is a strip of land in front of an automotive repair company, and the other is a tiny triangle at the end of a subdivision. You can't use them. We can't do anything with them. The counties will not take them back. Why would they? But we have to continue to pay taxes. So these properties can kind of be like gum on the bottom of your shoe. A good idea could be if you have a gift acceptance policy for your congregation, you can accept property on a case-by-case basis. If you don't have a gift acceptance policy, Mark and I can help you. We have resources and forms that you can put one together. So just kind of be thinking about gift acceptance as far as property is concerned. Or you too may be paying taxes on the triangle of land at the end of a marsh in a subdivision. The other part is about memorial gardens. They're lovely. That's part of our spiritual inheritance as Episcopalians, but it also can be fraught with a lot of pain and difficulties. If you have one, a memorial garden already, we actually do have guidelines on how we want those to run. If you're thinking about starting one, please let me know. If anybody calls and wants cremated remains back, handle that with great care. You may want to give me a call. It helps me to talk it through as part of my own therapy based on some of the things I've been through in the churches, but also I have some wisdom that I might be able to share about that. So about memorial gardens, I get a lot of calls about that. So let me know how we can help you. Thanks, Adrienne. We can move along. Thanks. Property and liability insurance. I want to let everybody here know that it is highly recommended and required for our mission congregations that your property and liability insurance is through the Church Insurance Company of Vermont, which is part of the church pension plan. We have found over and over again, when congregations are covered with other companies, the coverage isn't that good. The rate of claims being paid is not that good. And with our own church, Episcopal Church Insurance Company, when things go wrong, the bishop's staff and the bishop herself can apply pressure to church insurance. So if you're out there with Brotherhood Mutual, Church Mutual, I actually know who you are because I have a list of the churches in our diocese that are not covered by church insurance, and I'm heading your way for a little chat. So we need to talk about that. I know that sometimes it is more expensive, but when it's time to pay a claim, that's when it matters. And there may be things you can do with your deductible or some of the coverages that can make it more affordable. So we've seen it happen where the other companies that are not our Episcopal company have dropped our churches, and it's hard to pick up coverage once you've been dropped if you have too many claims. But our own insurance company, it's easier to negotiate all that, and it's more likely and probable that they will keep you even if you had a lot of claims. I've been getting questions lately about the new liability coverages, one being the cyber liability. What that is like if you have a data breach. It has to do a little bit about what Mark was talking about, but I've noticed that there's been data breaches in the news. Google, T-Mobile, and funny enough, the FBI had a data breach. So that covers that. And malicious attack is exactly what it sounds like. Someone who enters the safety of your property and tries to do harm. These are two new kind of coverages. They should be automatic on your policy, no matter what company you're using. So yes to both of these. Questions, let me know. Kind of along with that, last summer, Bishop Perry commissioned a team of truly wonderful people in an emergency response planning group to put together a plan for our congregations that you all can use. We released the plan last October. It's up on our website. So I just want to go on record as thanking Mr. Rad Jones, Dean Scott Hunter, Deacon Glenn Morrison, Jerry Miller, and Sydney Fellner for helping put it together. We really identified in our churches, there are really three main categories where you will need to plan for emergencies. Of course, medical emergencies, environmental ones, weather-related, pandemics, and behavioral, people who will come on your property to do you harm. The members of this task force put together the plan, which is very detailed and practical. And also there is an offer to come out to a congregation to meet with your building and grounds, your vestry, anyone interested, to kind of put a plan together for your church. And as a result of this task force, the trustees have offered a grant to all of our congregations that are interested to help purchase an AED or an automated external defibrillator machine. The grants can be up to $750. I'm telling you, this grant application literally takes 2 minutes. If you requested funds for ice cream last year for your congregation, this grant request is as easy as getting money for ice cream. So these are the congregations that have already been awarded their grant. There's still money available. So if you're interested in helping to buy or to even refurbishing the one that you want, so the one you have, one congregation or two needed to buy new pads for their machine. So whatever you need to get your AED up and running or to help buy one, the grant request is easy. It's a simple form stack. Let me know if you can't find it on our website and I can send you the link. Thanks, Adrienne. I just want to touch for a second on employment issues. I get lots of questions all day, every day about employment issues. Hiring staff, of course, will run the background checks for you. When employment ends, this is like, I want to stress everybody, if you ever have the occasion to need to separate employment with a layperson, don't go on your own. There's a lot of laws that apply. We can help you with that. I've helped congregations before. We want to do it legally and fairly. We want to follow our own diocesan policy. So let me know if you run into that situation that you need to separate with the lay employee. Anything having to do with clergy goes through Canon Ellen and the bishop's office. If it's a lay person, please let me know. And another quick best practice, hiring parishioners is like really risky business. There are a lot of boundaries that can become blurry. And if it doesn't work, trying to separate is really hard. In a small church, it's harder because it could wipe out a whole vestry if you have to terminate somebody who's related to a vestry member. So we want to avoid that. But when you need help or get stuck, let me know. Questions about benefits. Crystal Ramirez is transitioning and taking over benefit duties as far as enrollment and our fringe benefits. So you can contact me or Crystal if you have questions about that. But we're here. We can help you, and I look forward to hearing from you about your employment issues as well. On the last category, just keeping our congregations safe. Mark did a great job of how we're going to keep our finances safe. There is training available now that's redone and really accessible, easy to do, and informative. An online safe church has been launched. Anything with sexual harassment or exploitation in the workplace, any kind of misconduct, please call the bishop's office. Please let me know if any of these come to your attention or you're worried or concerned about anything. Please call us and we can help you. The last thing I want to say, the last slide, I think, yep, the key contacts, 3 more Canons, Mark, Ellen, and I. If you're not sure who to call or email either of us. We're really good at passing along to someone else or another staff person. And on our website, there is a list of all of the staff and all of our roles. It's easy to access, and you can just give us a call or an email. And I was aware that since I kind of ended on the misconduct note, I want to go back and say, please apply for a grant to help with social service ministries, your advocacy, your summer children's program, and AED machine. We're here to help you. I'm happy to take your emails after. We won't have time for questions today, but I'm here. My old phone still works. My email works, and I look forward to hearing from you. That'll do for me today. Thank you.
Questions for Joanne?
Yes, put them in the chat, and we will include them in our newsletter for coming up as well.
Okay.
Thank you. And the AED grant, Adrienne just put in the link for that in the chat if you were wondering about that.
Okay, thanks, Adrienne, so much.
Yeah, thanks, Adrienne. And thank you, Canon Hardy.
Ellen, Carmen has sent out the requirements for Safe Church. Don't we have a list?
Yeah, we're gonna send all that out with our newsletter next week. So yes, but it's also on the website, and you can also call Carmen. And it's their videos. You can watch them as a group. So we'll put all of that information together. It's also, Adrienne, I think it's been in the newsletter, but we'll put that together. Because next up is Adrienne. She's going to talk to us about websites.
Good morning. I am going to talk to you about websites. I'm loading up my own slideshow now. So give me just one moment. Thank you all for hanging in there for me. I think this is going to be worth your time. Okay, so if you don't know me, I am the Associate for Communications at the Diocese, and I'm going to go over your church websites with you. So creating a compelling church website. Right now, your front door of your church is changing, and today more people might visit your church online rather than on site. And about over the last 10 years, especially over the last 3 years, the method for how people first connect with your church has shifted from physical to digital. And just like your church's physical venue, your church website is a digital venue that your surrounding community visits, except that your actual church building, your actual front door is not open 24/7. Like your website is. So having an effective and accessible website gives you a 24/7 response to anyone who might be looking for a place of worship. Much like your building, though, when it falls into disrepair, a neglected website communicates abandonment and can turn people away. It's not that difficult. What I want to get across to you today is it's not that difficult to come up with a website plan. And here's where you begin. You're going to put a team together, a website planning team. People who perceive your church's website, it's likely that this is how they're going to perceive your entire church. And so it's important to figure out who's on that team. If you want to revamp your website, if you want to completely redo your website, if you want to just update your website, put aside all of the technical roadblocks for a minute. You all can access your website. You can look at it, you can and go to it. You can find out what you need on it, what you don't have on it. What you need on that team are church specialists, not web specialists at this point. So if you don't know anything about web design, totally okay. If you know about your church, you should be on the team. You need content creators, and you're going to plan this out as you would any other church project. You're going to create a timeline. You're going to go over a budget. Now, what we're looking at here is we want you to be intentional. We want you to update your site with who you are, what you do, and why it matters. You're going to wear something called the outreach glasses, and Ellen touched on this a little bit. When we're creating a website, we want to look through the lenses of the people we want to reach. We're going to try to separate ourselves from the church a little bit and pretend like we're a new person coming to the church. It's hard to do, but put on those outreach glasses and think about what people are looking for when they come to your site. Not your current members, not the people that you know and you see all the time, not the people who already know where the building's located or what the worship is like. We're talking new people, strangers, those who are seeking a church, those who may be seeking a new church home. Each person that comes to your site is looking for information. So you're going to ask yourself, and you're going to design with intent, how do you draw people into your church? How do you attract people to your church story? And you answer those questions of how are we caring for people? What are we trying to do in our church? What are we doing in the community or beyond? All of those things might start to inspire you to say, you know, we're a pretty cool place and people should know about this, and start kind of writing down your church story. This is all still the concept phase. This is the biggest part of any website redesign or any website design is the concept. Once you have all this information pulled together, once you know who you are, the building of the website, that's just somebody, you know, clicking some buttons, and we'll get to that a little later. So what are you communicating about your choice or your church? And what I want you to think about is, what is our church voice? When I was hired at the diocese, one of the details, like on my job description, was, can you communicate through the diocesan voice? What is the voice of the diocese? And so I want you thinking, what is the voice of your church, of your congregation? And what is it like to be here? And again, you're going to look at it through these outreach glasses. And information is the key. So we're going to talk about, you know, here are the things that, you know, these are just suggestions. Well, I shouldn't say suggestions. This is the information you have to have on your page. Whatever order it's in, however easily accessible, you're going to have to discuss with your team. You're going to have to decide, you know, what do we want people to see first? What I want people always to see first on any church website or worship site is the name and location of your church, and then the time and the place for worship. Those are the most important things. Those should be right on your homepage. And I have looked at most, if not all, of the websites in our diocese, and everyone has them. How are they accessible? Some of them are a little harder to find than others. Some of them are right up front and center. So I encourage you to take a look at those, the 1 and the 2s, and figure out if those are easy for you to find if you're seeking and you're looking and you've never been to your church before. Contacts and staff page. you have to look at this page through your outreach classes. You know who works at your church, but imagine yourself in the position that you're new to the area and you're looking for a church to visit, and you've been through several church websites and you're clicking through the pages and you're trying to get a feel for who the church is, what programs they have available for your family, and you click the staff page, and what are you expecting to see? And what do you hope to get from this page? You hope to get familiarity, because you've never been to the building, you don't know the people, and we live in a time today where we kind of want to know what we're walking into. And so I encourage you to really have a strong staff page, have a strong contact, someone who they can contact for general questions, someone they can contact for critical life moments, funerals, weddings, those things where someone who doesn't go to your church might need your church for this critical life moment. And I encourage you to put staff photos up. Not all of you have staff photos, but we do like to see your faces when we're looking around for churches. And please, we're our own worst critics. So if you hate a photo of yourself, you may be the only one who hates the photo of yourself. So please do consider putting staff photos up. And this will also help visitors know who to turn to for specific situations. If you have a little bit of a role clarification under your staff photo, just a small bio. How many of you today on the call got emails from me this week and had no idea who I was and went to the staff page of the Diocesan website and looked me up? And there I was with my title and my smiling face, awkwardly, and you were able to find out who I was, my email address, my phone number, and then a little bit of background information about me. So I encourage you to offer that familiarity with people who may be looking for a church on your website. So online giving, some of you, I can't find your online giving links. So if you don't have an online giving platform, that is something that the diocese does provide. You can talk more with Mark about it, but you can go to edomi.org/give. Also put some directions on if someone wants to mail you some money, they should be able to find a way to do that. And so, it's a part of church online giving, and it needs to be there too. Any kind of upcoming events would be super helpful and inviting. And those are the kind of key points of information that need to be on your website. I've got a little key there. It's like unlocking your front door. What to expect? Ellen and Susie talked about this from when you walk into the church, but people want to know where to go. They want to know how to dress, what to expect before they walk in your front door. If you're anything like me, your grandparents have gone to the church where you're at right now. You've been there for 25 years. Everyone in your family's been baptized there and married there, and you know everything about that church inside and out. But that's you, and so we're trying to appeal to someone through that lens that they don't know what to expect. Are they going to overdress? Are they going to underdress? Are they going to feel like they don't belong if they walk in jeans? We work with someone on the communications team here at the diocese, and he on Easter was going to go to the cathedral to see Bishop Perry preach. And I was getting a text from him Easter morning, and he was like, "Am I allowed to wear jeans? What do I wear? Do I have to wear a tie?" And so this is someone who works with us. He works with us on the communications team. He's not Episcopalian, but he really wanted to go for Easter morning service at the cathedral. And it was just surprising to me that he was asking those questions, because to me, it's like, of course, wear whatever you want. It's, no one's going to say anything to you. Very welcoming, but he didn't know that. So putting any of that information on your website is helpful. And this is what, leads them to where they want to go. Is there a kids area? What will they experience when they go to the front door? They want to know the information that they're looking for. And you can figure out this page by asking yourself, what would I want to know before I visited this church? One of the most difficult things to do is walk into a new church. And I'm sure many of us have not done that in a very long time. Where do I park? Is the building ADA accessible? All of those things are super helpful. One of the questions that I got the most is, should we show photos of our people? I say no. I feel like this gets dated quickly if you have photos of, on your homepage of a group of people, or, these beloved people. This gets dated, first of all, very quickly. This also can exclude others that might not look like you before they even get to your church. They might not know that you have a very diverse congregation because the first picture they see on your website is not diverse. And so that it can give a weird sense of community that's not always welcoming and is not always accurate. And so can you have a photo gallery on your page? Sure. Most of the time, if you have a church Facebook page, a lot of people upload event photos that kind of keep everybody happy. You can have a gallery page, just not on your home page. It could be something like a members area. And that's super helpful and fun for people to look through. It's helpful for me when I have to make a video for a diocesan convention and I go to your website and I go to the gallery page and I'm downloading photos to put in the slideshow. So thank you for everyone who has a gallery page. But I encourage you to find beautiful parts of your church and take gleaming sunshine photos of the sun shining through the stained glass of your worship space. If you have an iPhone, you can do it. And again, this is collecting the photos. This is collecting the information. This is what your website team is doing at this point. Taking some photos. Oh my gosh, it's Sunday morning and the sun is shining and we're in the middle of worship and it's beautiful through the glass window. Take your phone and take a picture. I don't think anyone's going to care. And put that in the possible photos to use for the website folder. It's an opportunity to get a little creative, and anyone can do it. You don't have to know how to design a website to start pulling together some pictures for your website. If you don't want to take pictures, or you're feeling like you don't have enough, there's a couple websites here that you can go to, and they're free. You sometimes you have to put a little line underneath them, photo by, but they're free images. They're easy to download. They're very nice quality. I use them for Bishop Perry's sermons sometimes when I email them out. So after, this is when it might get a little complicated, but it is still, we're not in the 90s. Nobody needs to know HTML coding to do a website. So we're going to decide after we have a plan in place, after we have a story to tell, after we figured out what we want on our website, what we don't want on our website. Maybe we have a little folder on the desktop with some photos on it. We have things ready to go, ready to post all of our contents there. Then we decide, how are we going to build this? How are we going to update this? Do we have someone on our staff that updates the website? Do we need to hire someone? Does our secretary know a little bit about website? Is she willing to try this? And then you do your research. And this is where you can contact me. I'm happy to help you with directing you to some of the do-it-yourself website platforms that I like. I'm happy to give you some names of local web designers that I think could pull off some pretty cool things for you for relatively inexpensive. But let's look at it for a moment when we talk about that budget. I just want to touch on that for the price around and the get bids. The tile, needs replacing, the concrete's cracked, the drains aren't draining. I know, I've been on the Vestry before, so I know what you're looking at. I know the price tags on all of these repairs, but I think what I'm asking is for you to take a look at your website as one of those repairs. And this is worth your time and this is worth your money. And as we try to grow and you try to create compelling worship and you try to create, grow and build your church, and this is an integral, and this is a very important, I apparently can't talk, a very important part of growing that church environment, inviting new people and reaching new demographics, reaching your community. You need to have a functioning, compelling website that's going to represent who you are. Some of the websites that I've looked at within our diocese, the congregation I know is thriving. It's a great dynamic group of people. They're just doing all kinds of amazing things. And then I went to the website and it was like, oh, that doesn't look like a thriving congregation at all. So you want to be aware of what you're saying visually, what you're communicating, and of course, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help. Here's my contact information. Please email me. We've already had a couple of the congregations in the diocese rework their websites. They're really, really getting some great feedback on it. And I'm happy to help wherever I can. So if you have any questions, I have not been looking at the chat. So let me just look at that and I'll hand it back over to Bishop Perry. And thank you so much, everyone.
Questions for Adrienne and friends?
I have yes, you also want to take into account the mobile stuff, but that's not, not right away. That's going to come in when you're building the website. So what I really want this group of people focusing on right now is the content, the who we are, and what we have and what we need when it comes to the website. The details, the technology, all that stuff can be worked out later on. Get your plan together first.
Nice. And I'm going to say, in terms of folks on the website, I'm going to say it's about context. And I'm a girl who likes to see people on the website, like to see a variety of people. What I don't like to see are kids' faces. I want to see the backs of kids, right? But I am someone who does really enjoy getting that sense of seeing the incarnation of the spirit of your congregation. However, I'm never going to put anybody's picture on a website without their signed written permission. Right? We're going to always ask folks. I also think in terms of live streaming, folks, I think you need to let people know who are going to be in the camera. Let them know and say, if you don't want to be ever on live stream, sit over here. I served a church in the Round, and I know that since this day I've left before they started live streaming, but I know that they're very clear with signs in the pews that if you're on this side of the altar, you're on the live stream. If you don't want to be on the live stream, go to the other side of the altar, right? So I think those are the things where you can put, again, gracious, whimsical signs. And don't forget a little bit of whimsy on that website. We had a section that it was just called boring stuff. And it was one of the top tabs. And it was one of the most clicked on tabs we had. And you would click on it and it would be like the acolyte schedule. It would be the check request. And people are like, yeah, that is boring, right? But it let people understand, they got an insight into the affect of the congregation, right? Oh, they've got a sense of humor. If there were like dogs around the place, the dogs were on the website, they had very complete bios. They had email addresses that got directed to me. And it was a great day when I realized that both my 18-year-old long-haired miniature dachshund and I had both been invited to present at a conference. And I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe this isn't quite as legit as I thought it was. So, you all, my goodness, you all have stayed through this. Oh, thank you very, very much. I so appreciate it. Do we have any? I got literally, I'm going to do thank yous, but I got 1 minute. If you got that burning question that you want to have, you want to ask one of our great folks here. Like, no. Okay. I thank you so very much to Adrienne, who was running all of those slides. Thanks to Joanne and Mark and Susie and Ellen. We've got, I know Susan Mason and Crystal Ramirez from my staff are also on our call. And I always want to do a shout out to Carmen Piggins, our missioner for young people, for Kara Chapman, who's in the helping with bookkeeping and accounting, and Veronica Dunbar, Sister V, who's our missioner for spirituality and race. Lots of really great people trying real hard to get good stuff done. So, and we exist for you. We're here for you, and are delighted that you've taken the time to be with us today. We'll send out the slides, we'll send out the chat, and we're available for more conversation. Anything or anyone I have mistakenly omitted? Shout out to the folks like Grace and Mount Clemens and All Saints Pontiac who are doing this as a crowd. I love it. I think Paula Miller's got some folks over some St. Michael's who are doing it as a crowd. Yay. How much?
Linda Carter, you've got your crew with you too.
Who's that?
Linda Carter.
Oh, yay. Yay. So I just really appreciate it. Hey, tomorrow afternoon, 4:00, Feast of Advent Jones. Love to see you at our cathedral at 4. The Very Reverend Owen Thompson is going to be our preacher. Music's going to be great. So come, if it works for you, please come and join with us in this really wonderful celebration. All right. Canon Hardy, you want to pray us out, friend?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we are just so grateful and excited and regenerated and renewed. And some of us may be worried, and it's all good, Lord. We're grateful for the information that we have and the resources that you've given each congregation and our diocese in people and finances and in talent. And we just ask that you just keep us close and keep us just mindful of our connection and what we can do for one another, and to send us off into this beautiful sunny day. We give you thanks for all you have done and continue to do. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, friends. Thank you, Canon Hardy. Thanks, guys. Thank you for your good work, friends. I know how much time it takes. I really